Well, it wouldn't be a Cronenberg film if it weren't some decomposing people, wouldn't it? Let's talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's movie review of The Shrouds, the newest film from director David Cronenberg. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, David Cronenberg is back with a what I would call a less horror film, to be fairly honest. A film that is actually more of a drama with some sci-fi elements that, of course, deals with body horror in a lot of respects, and is about a character named Karsh, who's played by Vincent Cassel, who in essence lost his wife, who's played by Diane Kruger, and he has also invented this thing called grave tech, which is the ability to allow people to watch their family decompose as they pass on. And he invented a thing with the help of the Chinese like a Chinese company with a thing called the Shrouds, which is just a shroud you put over yourself so it can actually view yourself in like a 3D realm. But in the process, his grave tech, his grave site has been vandalized. In essence, he is trying to figure out who did it. He has characters that are played by people like Pearce and Sandrine Hoult who come into the mix, and it's a movie about loss. It's a movie about an individual who's going through some real traumatic experiences, but it's also a David Cronenberg film, so it has a lot of, inside messaging when it comes to who human psyche is, what they involve themselves with. There's some really kind of body horror-ish things in this, and it's very much a David Cronenberg film with a lot of like messaging about the human psyche in a lot of that respect. So there you go. So I'm always up for a David Cronenberg film. They're not always the best films in the world, but he is an individual that has earned the goodwill, earned the respect for me, at least as a director, that I'm always fascinated with what he's going to do next. His movies aren't well kind of marketed at this point. He just does what he wants. And if he gets financing, then he gets financing, so on and so forth. But this is a movie that has, a pretty decent cast in it. It has Diane Kruger, Vincent Cassel, Pearce, Sandrine Hoult. It's a movie that also is dealing with some personal issues that David Cronenberg has gone with. His wife died, of course, in 2017. Very traumatic, and it's a movie that is dealing with a lot of loss and a lot of, the scenario, what happens when you have to get past that, how do you move in past that, and he adds his David Cronenbergian touch where it has a very high concept feel to it. It is very much in that Naked Lunch or The Fly. He is an individual that takes the kind of macabre and the kind of dark and disturbing and kind of throws in some really interesting ideas and concepts. So that's what this film is doing. Once again, it is about a guy who, in essence, like creates this tech because he wants to see his wife, even though his wife died in really unfortunate circumstances, so on and so forth. Diane Kruger's playing basically herself as sisters, similar to like what Jeremy Irons did in Dead Ringers and stuff like that. So, and it's a movie that premiered at Cannes like over a year ago at this point, or close to over a year ago. So why it took so long to get out into the public, I have no idea, but it's been at TIFF and stuff like that. But with that said, it's releasing in theaters very, very soon, or at least limited release. And I was lucky enough to get a screener for this because I love David Cronenberg movies. I think they're very different and very interesting. So the question remains, is this movie a good David Cronenberg? Is it a bad David Cronenberg? It's a middle-of-the-road Cronenberg, to be fairly honest. It's a very interesting film. I think Vincent Cassel and Diana Kruger are fantastic in this movie. I think they portray grief really, really well. I think Pearce is okay. He's doing okay stuff, but I think as far as acting, I think that's where this movie strives, and it's like positives, its strengths is through the grief that Vincent Cassel feels for the loss of his wife. We see flashbacks of Diana Kruger's character as she starts losing body parts and starts losing the ability to survive. It's really kind of chaotic and very visceral, very heartbreaking to watch. Watching Vincent Cassel create this thing out of the idea of allowing loved ones to see their family is a really interesting thing to see. I love what Vincent Cassel does in this. I've always loved Vincent Cassel just on the nature of how different of an actor that he plays, how very kind of forceful he plays, but he also feels very reserved in this movie, very pulled back, and it's actually a really nice performance. And Diana Kruger, who has been in a lot of stuff like of course, a lot of big budget stuff like National Treasure and stuff like that, really gets a chance to shine and really gets a chance to kind of play two different sides of characters, whether it be kind of more the sexual character of her sister, or the more reserved one that has more kind of complex feelings, I guess you could say. There's a more complex nature to the living sister than there is in the one that has passed away. But it also brings in this like conspiracy theory of like what starts happening to Vincent Cassel's Karsh character, how he starts to kind of be put in a scenario where he meets this blind woman who he kind of starts a relationship with, and how that physically works, and how it kind of starts to pull at him, and then the nature of like the destroyed tombstones and how that pulls at him, and how the kind of intricacies of like dealing with the Chinese company and how that plays into today's societal efforts. And there's a lot of just kind of a person going through some really traumatic experiences, but also dealing with like his brain starting to unravel and starting to wonder what's true and what's not, and the conspiratorial nature of an individual trying to just decipher what's happening. And it leads down some roads that are very David Cronenberg in feel when it comes to like what the reveals do and how they operate. And then it leads you to an ending, which is very, what I would call, disappointing to a lot of people. And I think that's what the major issue with this movie is. Like I said, the characters are not the issue. They're actually really well represented. And if you look at Vincent Cassel, he looks very much like David Cronenberg. So there is a lot of David Cronenberg himself in this character, who I'm assuming David Cronenberg is a visceral director, but he's a very heartfelt, very kind of, he loves his family in a lot of respects. So that's why, you see a lot of his sister, or a lot of his daughter and son, who are now directors. But I'm sure the death of his wife was really something that ate on him, and that's why he put himself into this character, because Vincent Cassel really looks like David Cronenberg if you look at him closely. But once again, I think the acting is really good. Even Guy Pearce, who is doing Guy Pearce and is doing a kind of a squirmy-ish kind of guy who's a computer tech, is, fine. But I think what this movie attempts to do, what it attempts in the end, is a little bit lesser than the whole. I think, the fact that David Cronenberg put CGI into this movie is kind of a letdown a little bit, because he's more of a body horror guy. I think when he focuses on the practical, I think it works a lot better. I think the central mystery, the central idea of what is going on in this movie is very confusing at times. Yes, it deals with grief. Yes, it deals with the compository nature of how you handle moving forward. But I think the nature and the simple fact that Cronenberg is very much a director that likes to leave things open, likes to leave things very weird and kind of off-putting, I think it kind of fails in that sense. So it's a movie that I really liked. It's a movie I enjoyed, but I enjoyed it more for the acting than I did for the story, because the story starts out very normal in David Cronenberg's sense, but then it starts getting weirder and weirder and weirder, to the extent where it starts to kind of collapse upon what its narrative is trying to do. And that's just a sense of like, maybe it's just, for instance, when Stephen King got hurt, when he got hit in that accident, he started writing stuff that didn't make any sense. It was his mind. I think this is what this movie's trying to do, is having David Cronenberg trying to work out the death of his wife, the nature of how that affects his brain, how it affects his psyche, what would happen if this was like a sci-fi tech that he could put together. It's about a man trying to deal with the loss of someone, and I think that's what David Cronenberg's trying to work out with this film. So I think in the end, I really enjoyed it from that aspect, like I keep saying, but the story it's very convoluted. It can be very confusing, and it's not as bad as like The Crimes of the Future, which I really didn't like, but it is a movie that really is not the best of David Cronenberg. But I get what he's going for. I get the nature of the trying to move past and trying to comprehend and trying to live in the world where you've lost a loved one. So but anyways, that is my take on the Shrouds. Once again, it is a movie that is very low-key compared to what David Cronenberg is doing, but there is very David Cronenbergian messages and kind of ideas and concepts and machinations and stuff like that. So go in knowing this is a David Cronenberg film, but it is a very smaller film in the essence of something like Easter Promises or something like that. So there you go. But with that said, that's gonna be my take on the Shrouds. It'll be in theaters or it'll be on VOD soon. I can't remember which is gonna happen first, but that's it'll be able to watch at some point. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. In the comments below, what's your favorite David Cronenberg film? Did you watch the Shrouds? What do you think of it overall? But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see on the channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at top to find coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, guys.